So this is where the process kind of starts. Yeah, please feel free to take notes or record if you want. I'm going to be covering a lot of stuff today, so this, it wouldn't be a good excuse to take notes or whatever. But I'm going to go over this mix from the perspective of this group reached out to me to mix a song, and they just sent it to me. So we imported all of our tracks. We have the session name and saved it and everything. The question is, where do we start? What's the first thing that we should do when we receive a new song to mix?
Listen to
Yeah. Why? Why would we listen to it?
Get the feel of it, types is right.
Yeah. It's so easy to get multi-tracks and you just start doing stuff. You start submixing, you start EQing, and if you don't know the perspective of the entire song, you really don't know what you're mixing to. By listening through the entire thing, you know what's coming. Like, as of right now, we don't know what genre this is. We don't know how we want to mix it. We don't know what's important in the mix.
Okay.
So by sitting down and just listening through the whole thing, just start to finish, we can start to think about how we want to mix to be. So while we're listening, I want you all to pay attention to the instruments that you hear, kind of what the overall vibe of the song is. Like, is it kind of laid back, chill, or is it like a high intensity, like, really expressive song? This is also a time where you want to listen out for any audio issues. Sometimes when you get bounces, some of the files could be a little wonky from the studio. So like if you hear something that like obviously shouldn't be there, or if you're seeing like obvious like glitches in the waveform, then we talk to whoever recorded it and sent new files. But seeing how these were pulled from the internet, we're not going to be able to do that. But again, just another quality control step to make sure that everything that you're working with is should be there. The only thing that I'm going to do, and pretty much one of the only things that I use groups for in Pro Tools, is selecting the all group and turning the faders down just a little bit. Every new Pro Tools session that you get always has an all group, which controls all of the faders in your entire session. So I do this because I don't want to hear any clipping in my session, and we're going to talk about clipping when we actually do the mix a little bit more. Now, if you've never heard just unmixed raw multi-tracks, this might be a little jarring, but this is how most songs kind of begin their life. So I'm just going to listen start to finish. It is about 3 minutes and 15 seconds, so it's not too long. So here is Remember Jones, Don't Put Me on Hold.
And all
All right. So that's the song. What do we think? What do we hear?
Very high energy, lots of horns.
Yeah, lots of horns. What instruments did you hear? Besides horns? Yeah, bass. What else?
Like an organ in there?
Yeah, there's an organ, there's piano, drums. Not only do we have a lead vocalist, but we have background vocals going on as well. It's a pretty dense mix. Like there's a lot of instruments going on, and it's very high intensity. So now that we've listened, we can kind of make some assumptions here. One, the lead vocals are very quiet in the mix. I mean, it's not mixed, but the vocals are very quiet compared to everything else. So, we're talking about like mixing in general. Most people listen to music. They want to hear vocals, and the vocals are one of the most important things in the mix because that is usually, again, why people listen. Unless it's like an instrumental or something where there are no vocals, then something else typically takes the lead role. But usually, if there's vocals, that is like the main focus of the song for most people. So we want to make those vocals pop. And we want to kind of find a way to balance all of these elements that are going on because, we do have kind of an organ going crazy. We have pianos and horns and there's so much. So we have to make sure that kind of everything has its own place, but is also balanced with the rest. So we kind of have an idea of what we're in for. So now it's time to actually start the mix. Anyone here into like culinary? Kind of, so. You familiar with the term mise en place?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what it means?
It's like divvying up your resources before you use. Isn't that what mise en place was?
Yeah. So, I like to find a lot of parallels, like not only with like audio production, but like if you're into like a creative field, you can pull a lot of inspiration from other fields, right? So I love cooking, and there are a lot of parallels between like culinary and like audio production. So one of the things that I like to think of is mise en place specifically because, it's a French term and it stands for things in place. And the idea of mise en place is before you start cooking, you make sure that you have all of your ingredients and not only have them, but they are already portioned and prepped. So, like if whatever you're doing calls for like a diced onion, you would go make sure you have enough onion and you dice it. You measure out all of your spices, do up your meat however you want. So when you're cooking, like when the pan's hot and things matter, you're not stumbling around the kitchen like, oh shit, I forgot to mince my garlic. Where is it? Oh, we didn't have garlic. Okay, this sucks. So before you start cooking, you lay everything out so you don't have to think about it. You just go and dump in or start the process. This is what I like to do with my mixes. My first step is always submixing and setting up any effects that I want. I like to do the submixing and the more like nerdy routing stuff before I go to the actual mix, because when I'm in kind of like the creative mood, I don't want to have to make sure that like, oh, the submix isn't working, now I gotta go fix it. So I like to start off by taking care of my submixing first and then moving on after. So kind of like what the idea of mixing a track like this is, kind of going back to food. You could think of going to the studio like going to the store. So you're getting all the raw ingredients to make something, but the mixing process is like cooking. You're taking the raw ingredients from the studio and you're turning them into something that a person can enjoy. Because like, yes, you can just listen to the tracks straight from the studio, but they're a little rough. And So our job is to take these raw ingredients and kind of turn them into something that you can show somebody, and they're not just eating a plate of, like, you know, flour, a little bit of sugar, baking soda, water. Like, instead you mix them all together and you make a pancake, and everyone loves pancakes. So let's go ahead and get started on the submixing. I like using routing folders, so that is what I'm going to do. It's a weird gap. Oh, I have, there we go. So, I'm going to use routing folders because it's fast, and I prefer to hide tracks when I'm done using them. So selecting the first 8 tracks, these are the drums. So select tracks, right click, move to, and then new folder. Remember to change basic folder to routing folder, and then check that box that says route tracks to new folder. And then, of course, the screen goes black the second I start doing something. There we go. So, along with making the routing folders, you didn't bring your headphones with
I
you.
took my backpack. I went to my parents' house on Friday, and I took all my stuff
Okay.
out and I forgot to put it back.
That'll do it. So, along with the folder, I also like to color code my submixes. I think the visual breakup of the different colors helps me kind of stay within each individual section. So, to change color in Pro Tools, what you do is you double click on the little bar of blue that's on the bottom of your track, and then you're brought up with the color palette. And then you can just go ahead and pick, let's make the drums purple. And it should change the color of the tracks themselves too. So now all of my drums are this purple. So now I'm gonna go through and submix and color code the rest of the session. So the bass is just one track, but I'm still gonna change the color because I don't like the stock Pro Tools blue. We have 2 guitar tracks, so I'm gonna submix those. Right click, move to new folder, GTRS. Let's do green for the guitars. Is anyone here colorblind? I mean, like, would have an issue with me changing the colors? Okay. So we have 3 horns here, so same thing, right click, move to new folder. What color should we make the horns?
Yellow.
Hey, okay, I like where your head's at. We have 3 key tracks, so again, same process. Let's do a teal for the keys. We have 3 percussion tracks. Move to new folder. Let's do that blue for the percussion, and then we have 2 background vocals. Lead vocal, change the color. Background vocal. Move to new folder, and then BG box. Change that to the color you pick is very important. Do that. Boom. So this right here is why I like using the routing folders. Because I took a session that is 23 tracks, and I'm able to condense it down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 faders. So when I don't want certain instruments or sections, I can collapse it down and hide all of these tracks. So next thing I'm going to do is make a master fader because I need, I want to monitor my levels. So Command Shift N, change mono to stereo, and then audio track 2, master fader. Go ahead and hit create. So now, along with my submixing, I like to take this time to get my effect sense going, as well as adding in any plugins that I think are going to be necessary, like straight off the rip. So, first things first is I definitely want a reverb for the vocals, because I think for this type of track, you don't want like a super big reverb, but you still want a little bit of space on the vocals. So I'm gonna go ahead and set that up. So Command Shift N to make a new stereo aux input. Let's just name it verb. Set the input as bus 1 and 2. And then on the lead vocal, we're gonna make a send to bus 1 and 2. Do I have to do anything with this fader? Yeah, we have to turn it up. So option clicking to put it to 0, and then let's throw a reverb plugin on the actual, let's do space. Okay, I need 2 effects in this, noise. So along with the lead vocal, of these 3 subgroups, what would you want to hear on either one of them?
Horns.
Okay, horns. Do we want to hear a reverb on the horns or something else? What'd you say? Guitar. One on guitar. Let's do a delay on the guitar.
What, you want to do a delay in it?
Yeah, let's do a delay on the guitar. Yeah, that might sound cool. So on the guitar submix, let's do the same thing. Command Shift N, stereo, aux input. Let's do a delay. Set the input to bus 3 and 4, and then let's do a send to bus 3 and 4. Turn the fader up, and then let's put our delay. Yeah, the Moger Foger. Yep. Yeah, that might be fun. So let's put all of my submixes or my effects at the side here. So along with my effects ends, one thing that we are going to need to do is to throw some EQs on things. Now we're just going to be using EQs for some very specific stuff, but let's do lead vocal. So let's go inserts A through E, plugin, EQ, and then the stock Pro Tools EQ is the EQ3 7-band. I'm also going to put one on the snare top.
I like this process you do when you whipping it up before you cook it. That's
Thanks. Yeah,
that's cold.
so my main thing, like when I'm mixing or doing any of this, if I give myself too much freedom, I don't get anything done. So by like kind of segmenting what I do, it helps me be a little bit more focused, and like this process works for me, but if you have your own specific way of doing it, I mean, it's not wrong. It's just what we do, like this is technically speaking like an art form. So like there's no single way to do it. And everything that we're teaching you in this program is kind of like, if you want to think of it as best practice, but everything that I've told you that are like rules, I've broken those rules so many times in like projects that I've worked on. So it really just depends on like the context and situations, all that. But yeah, this is just a process that works for me, and you know, as you all get more experience, you're gonna find out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And I mean, honestly, like as long as the end product sounds good, it really doesn't matter like how you get there. So let's do, how many high pass filters on 4 tracks? I have 2 already. Let's do guitars. Yeah, that'll do this. 4. Plug-in EQ, EQ3 7-band. Yeah, I'm gonna explain the purpose of these EQs when we get to it. All right. So I have my track sub-mixed, I have my effects ends made, plugins on things that I think I'll need. So let's actually start listening to this. Now, I like to work the mix from left to right. So if you're looking at the order of these tracks and wondering why it goes like drums, bass, guitars, and kind of other stuff, if you notice the other tracks that I gave you for last week's assignment, no, not last week, the routing assignment kind of followed the same thing. This is just kind of like a leftover remnant from recording onto tape. So the way that tape wasn't as like flawless as the digital is. So as you recorded over tracks on tape, those tracks would lose fidelity. So specifically like quiet things, well, things would lose volume and like high end. So you always started the recordings with drums because they were the loudest thing in the mix. And as you recorded it on top of the drums, it's okay if they kind of drop in volume a little bit because they are so loud. So the main reason why you see like vocals at the end is because the vocals you want to be as clear as possible, and that wasn't really possible on tape if you recorded the vocals too early. So the track layouts themselves are kind of a remnant of that. You can change where the tracks are in your session, it really doesn't matter, but I've kind of grown to like this, starting with the drums and bass, because those are like the foundation of the mix, and then kind of building everything on top. But again, this is all something that you can move around. If you like your vocals being first, then put them right at the start. But yeah, this is just it's like the industry standard way of like organizing a session, but you can really have it any way. So I'm going to start by turning down the reverb and delays that we made. Especially when you're starting off a mix, it's a little hard to mix when you have reverbs going on. So I like to get a good mix going first and then bring in those effects to kind of fit into the mix already. I don't want to be fighting with those effects when I'm still working out the overall balance themselves. And now I'm just going to go and mute everything that isn't the drums. And turn the faders down on everything that isn't the kick drum. So let's find a spot that has some kick, and luckily, all right. So our first two tracks, we have kick in and kick out. Now, when you're in the studio and you kind of have freedom of like mic placements and microphone choices, sometimes you do see like two or more microphones on the same source. So common ones that are also present in this are 2 mics for the kick and 2 mics for the snare. So we have kick in and kick out, and snare top and snare bottom. So kick in is a microphone that is inside of the kick drum, kind of right behind where the beater hits the actual like playhead of the kick. And this is where you get a lot of the high end of the kick drum, so like the attack. That all comes from the kick in mic. And the kick out is where you get a lot of that body of the kick drum. This is kind of not a good example of a kick out, but hey, we're gonna work with it. So when you're dealing with sources that have 2 microphones on them, it's really kind of your choice to decide how it sounds. So if you emphasize more the kick in than the kick out, you're gonna get a kick that has a little bit more attack. But if you want kind of like a rounder kick, you can turn down the kick in favor of the kick out. So because this is like a high intensity thing, I want more of the attack on the kick drum, so it cuts through the mix a little bit. So I'm going to emphasize the kick in over the kick out, but I still want the kick out to have some of that body of the kick itself. Sounds a little basketball-y, but that's okay. So let's mute these while I show you the snare top and bottom. So this is the snare top. snare top is where the body of the snare drum is. It's like the low end of it. And the snare bottom is where you get like the high-end sizzle of a snare drum. So if you don't know like why a snare drum is called a snare drum, on the bottom head of the snare there is a strip of kind of creased wires, and those wires are the snares of the snare drum, and they're held under tension on the bottom head, and those snares are what gives the snare drum this sound. So it's like where you get that high-end sizzle, like that tinniness, but like attack, all comes from those suspended snares on the bottom head. So if you want a snare that is kind of less in your face, you would favor more of the snare top. But if you want a snare that's a little snappier, you would favor the snare bottom. So let's actually listen to more snares. So all I'm doing right here is trying to find a good relationship between the kick and the snare drums. I think I like a little bit snappier of the snare on this, so I'm going to emphasize more of the snare bottom than the snare top. I think that sounds all right. So now we have two toms, rack tom and a floor tom. Toms don't usually play a lot, but they do right here. So let's just go ahead and give these a listen. So that was a little easy to miss. So there are the snares, or toms. So I have the tom track soloed, but what do you hear? Yeah. So, when I was saying earlier that like drums are loud, drums are really loud. And what makes a drum kit kind of special is it is an instrument that is made up of other instruments. So each element of a drum kit is like a separate drum that you can play by yourself. But when you put a bunch of those loud drums together and play them at the same time, your microphones are going to pick up the other sounds of the drum kit. That is just kind of what makes acoustic drums special, is because like they're loud, and what you're hearing is called bleed. So it's the other sources that are being picked up by the mics that are on the toms, and like you hear this with every mic on the drum kit. People like to go and like cut out the spaces where the drum isn't playing to kind of minimize on this bleed, but I like the bleed because were you doing bleed? It's such a good song. Yeah. No, we're not going to listen to Meshuggah in class. But god damn it. Yeah, so people do like to cut out the bleed, but I like to keep the bleed in because that's what makes the acoustic drum sound convincing. Like when you work with like digital drum samples, they kind of sound a little sterile at times. So keeping the bleed in kind of makes these acoustic drums more acoustic. So for these toms, I'm just gonna find a good level. Cool. And then we have two sets of stereo tracks. One is the overheads. So the overheads are a pair of stereo microphones pointed top down on the drum kit that pick up the cymbals and kind of the whole kit itself. Overheads are a great way to add a sense of space to your drum kit, and again, acting as a microphone for things that you typically don't mic all the time, like cymbals. So too much room mic or overhead, it can sound a little overpowering. Not enough, it can sound a little sterile.